Hello and welcome to the Data Privacy FERPA Intro to Service module. This material is reinforcement and review of content presented at training. Data privacy is an important concept for our tutors to understand, so this quick module will highlight the most important concepts that were covered in training. The first thing we'd like to call your attention to is the reading and mapping data privacy policy definitions. We have specific definitions in our policy regarding data privacy. This policy was provided to you with your AmeriCorps manual. Please keep this policy handy during this training and while answering the questions associated with this module. Protected information is broken into three categories: education records, personally identifiable information, and sensitive data. Education records mean any record that are directly related to the student and maintained by an educational agency, such as a school, or maintained by a party acting on behalf of the educational agency, like our tutors. Some examples of education records would be student grades, data entered into RCDMS or MCDMS, and our tutor logs. Personally identifiable information, or PII, is any information that can be used to distinguish or trace an individual's identity. So this could include a student's name, ID number, social security number, student address, family name information, student place or date of birth, or any other information that could be used to link the information to a specific student. Some examples in our work would be the state test ID numbers that we use in our data entry databases, as well as the student rosters with name, grade, teacher, and date of birth that are given to our tutors at the beginning of their service. Sensitive data is any data that could carry the risk for adverse effects from an unauthorized or inadvertent disclosure. Adverse effects can include anything that could be socially, physically, or financially damaging. This could include things such as disability or health information that tutors are given in order to be able to work with their students, eligibility for special education services, or status as someone in foster care or adoption services. So what is not included in the protected information? So each school in the U.S. is required to define directory information. Each school has the right to define what they include in directory information, and this is information that can be disclosed freely without any harm to come to the student. Some service sites include things such as student's name, address, or telephone number in this types of directory information. However, this varies site to site, and you have to check with your site to see what they include in directory information. Some specific examples could be information that is included in a yearbook or sports or extracurricular rosters, things that are readily available to outside parties. You probably remember hearing the term FERPA from your training, but may have forgotten what it means. FERPA stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, but really it's just a common sense law that was created in order to protect children and families. It might sound scary to have to comply with a federal law, but the tenets in place as a part of this act are really quite easy to comply with. The basis of FERPA is that only those that have a legitimate need to know private information should be told that private information. When we say need to know, we mean the legal right to know, such as the parents or guardians, and a business need to know. So that would include the lead teacher that you are pulling a student out of their class. They would have a need to know in order to do their job. If there's a legitimate educational need for access to the student's private data, then the school or site personnel should have access to that data. So there's a difference here between want to know and curiosity and the legal right or need to know. So some protected data is given to tutors by the service site. So examples of this are that we need access to the state accountability data from the school. This is provided by the internal coach. Once the school gives it to us, we have the obligation to protect that data on behalf of the student. Additionally, members will also need to access demographic data about each student. This is also protected data that should not be shared unless someone has a legitimate business need to know or a right to know. Internal coaches will also determine if there's any other information that members have a need to know. For example, if an internal coach has to share with a tutor information about a student's hearing. Say the student had their hearing assessed and they'll be getting a hearing aid for one ear, so they might have difficulty hearing directions. That's something that a tutor would need to know in order to do what they're there to do. However, the internal coach would not need to share that that student is also in foster care because the tutor does not have a need to know that information. Additionally, tutors themselves will be collecting protected data. You'll work with your internal coach to determine how to access the data that you need and where to store confidential files. It is extremely important that paper files be stored in a locked drawer. We cannot control who is allowed in and out of the school, but we can control where we keep our paper files. You should also find out how your school destroys confidential data. You should use this protocol for any data that you no longer need that is saved on paper. Never leave student information or data lying on your desk or work area unattended. Do not share data between students. If a student asks you what their partner got for a score on an assessment, you should not answer that question. Other students do not have a need to know the grades of another student. Tutors also have access to electronic data. In order to protect this data entry should be completed as soon as possible. Data should never be accessed from personal computers. You should use the provided school computers. Any downloads that are saved to the local desktop or laptop have to be cleared daily. You should never allow your passwords to be saved automatically by a computer browser. Use encryption services provided by the program if any student data must be sent. Your program manager can help you set up the encryption process that we use for our email in case you ever have to send any student data. Protected student data can only be disclosed with a parental release of information form. You can never assume consent, even if the parent or guardian is your best friend, your aunt, or your neighbor. In any case of disclosure, we need explicit written consent for the specific data to be released and the specific context in which it is to be released. This explicit written consent must be signed by a parent or legal guardian. And finally, what should you do if you suspect that someone has accessed your protected student data? Report the suspected access to your program manager immediately. They will work with you to determine next steps. The bottom line is that our number one priority is mitigating the risk to the student of any possibly exposed data. These reports include even suspected access or confirmed access to protected student data. A few examples that you might run into. One is if you return from winter break to find the data in your locked drawer has been left unlocked throughout winter break and that there are some files missing. In another case, you may hear a fellow member discussing specific student names and benchmark scores with friends at a school basketball game, with no people who have a legitimate business need to know that protected student information. Thank you for completing the Data Privacy Intro to Service module. Please complete the attached questions and ask your program manager if you have any follow-up questions that came out of this module. Thank you.